Welcome back again. Gosh, I was over in on the 890 studio with Terry, and you guys were working over those vendors really good. I'm sure they appreciate it. We appreciate it as well. And again, thanks for all of you folks coming out here today, and we're excited to have you. So next up is Dr. Abbey Wick and her team here. They're going to talk getting started with soil health. Dr. Abbey Wick is a soil health specialist from NDSU Extension, is one of the valued researchers that we use your research checkoff dollars to support. Abbey works primarily with management of salt-affected soils, reducing tillage and incorporating cover crops in rotation. She works with many farmers, including a few on this panel, that use innovative practices which allows her to learn alongside with them as they figure out the best options for farmers in Northern Plains and their farming operations. Just this past year, the North Dakota Corn Growers Association, working with Kevin Skunas, who is in the audience, and Kevin, we're very proud to say, is our second in command at National Corn right now. He'll be our national president 1 year from October. We were able to effort our national corn team to include Share Farm to the National Corn Growers Soil Health Partnership, which we're very proud of to put out there and around the countryside doing research on soil health. So Abbey is the moderator of the panel today. Thanks, Abbey, for being here and presenting for us. The first member of our panel that I'll introduce is our Corn Council Secretary, Terry Wehlander. Terry, got the corn jersey on. He farms near Delamere, North Dakota. He grows corn, soybeans, wheat, and barley, and includes cover crops in his rotation wherever he can. Terry is a fifth generation to his family farm out at Delamere. Next up is Scott Huso. Scott farms at Aneta. Scott grows wheat, barley, canola, pinto beans, soybeans, and corn. His farm is mostly minimum till, but he's working on new methods to allow more no-till application to row crops and various methods of fertilization in his no-till system. He's also working on increasing biological activity and organic matter in the soil to reduce the amount of fertilizer needed for raising his crops and helping his bottom line. He's proud to have some fields that have been in no-till for over 15 years, and I come from the Hope Country, and no-till up in that area is a little different than other areas, so congrats on that. Mark Huso. Brothers?
Yep.
Who's the smartest of the two?
Not me.
The Irie guys would be brawling out in the barnyard now, but okay, go ahead.
I won't disagree.
So Mark is an independent crop consultant that started Huso Crop Consulting in 2011. He works primarily in Nelson County as well as Ramsey, Walsh, Grand Forks, and Griggs counties. Mark works with a very diverse crop group and has started to work with cover crops to help salinity management and to transition acres to minimum and no-till situations. And the final member of our panel is Lee Briese.
Breeze like the wind.
An independent crop consultant in South Central North Dakota. He currently provides agronomic advice for 9 different cash crops grown over 85,000 acres annually. Lee is working with growers on customized strategies to incorporate cover crops, reduce tillage, and precision ag to address challenges in soil degradation, pest management, and economic profitability. Let's extend a warm welcome to all of our panel members. And later in the presentation, you'll have an opportunity to text in questions or ask questions. We'll have mics around the room for Abbey and her team. Again, welcome the crew. Thanks, Abbey.
Dale, maybe I should keep your script up here. It's much better written than mine. So this is a great opportunity and an excellent opportunity to talk about soil health. And so thank you to the Corn Council for inviting us and bringing up this idea of having a panel. I think that this panel that's up here, the farmers and the consultants that are here, really encompass what soil health is about in this state. I mean, it really came up in 2012 is when we started the soil health efforts through the state legislature, funding the soil health initiative, putting my position in place, and I kind of started my job thinking, oh man, what now? We've got salinity, we've got cover crops, we've got reduced till, we've got all these different things that we need to go after and try to implement on farm. And so I really credit these guys for helping me learn that process too, and showing and trying new things on their farms to get these practices in place. And then also the commodity support has been outstanding. It's one thing to hire people to do a job. It's another thing to give them money to do that job and support their activities. So between the Corn Council, the Soybean Council, the Wheat Commission, the three commodities have really backed the work that we were doing almost to $2 million, I think. Between 2012 to up to 2018, we've had almost $2 million worth of funding. And so anything that we do in extension and research has really been backed by the commodities, which tells me that everything that we're doing is for the growers, it's driven by the growers, and we're the ones implementing it and making these things happen. So I think really it's all about partnerships when we talk about soil health. It's not something I'm learning on my own. It's not something Scott or Terry are learning on their own, or that Lee or Mark are doing on their own. It's the integration of all three of us, plus the commodities, plus other people that are being involved. So I think what we'll do with our presentation today is we'll talk a little bit about goals for soil health and establishing those goals. It's a lot more difficult to say, I'm going to build soil health and then achieve the goal of building soil health. It's much easier to achieve goals of managing water or reducing erosion. Those goals are much easier to achieve, and because they're tangible. Soil health is not always tangible. It's not easy to measure either. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll turn it over to Terry and Scott to talk about their farm and their on-farm goals and what they're trying and doing to achieve those goals. This is meant to be interactive. I don't think any of us really like to talk at anyone. We actually prefer discussion. So if you want to text in questions as we go, I'll watch the screen and kind of see when those questions come in. And then I'll figure out when we can kind of stop what they're doing and ask some questions. So please make this interactive. I think we'll all enjoy it a lot more. We have an hour and a half for this session. So let's make it interactive and get some questions answered and figure out how we can get started with soil health on your farms. This is not meant to be super technical. This is meant to be a good starting point for a lot of different approaches.
So how do they text in questions?
How do you text in questions? I don't know. Jean? Is there a number you text a question to, or the media people? Yeah. Oh, there we go. That's how you text them in. So what does it say? Text ND Corn space and your question. So please do that, because we'll love to have your questions. And I think there's also a microphone that can be run around too if you don't want to text in a question, you just want to ask it. Okay. Let's see, so we're stuck on that one. Oops. Okay, go back. Okay, so why soil health? I think we often ask ourselves, why do farmers get into these approaches, or what drives them, and what drives a specialist to come in and do what I do, and what drives an agronomist to do what they do. And this is one of my main reasons, erosion control. And this is something I'm finding very common amongst a lot of different farmers, that they're looking to control erosion in their fields. So this is really one of the only doom and gloom slides that I want to show today, because I think we all want to stay really positive. But this was sent to me, I think, by our Assistant Director of Extension. He took this and texted it to me. And when I look at this, I think I was saying last week even, that this is why I do my job. But then this morning I thought about the reason I do my job is because of the things that I see farmers doing to control this erosion. That's what gets me up out of bed every day, is seeing the things that they're doing with reducing tillage, adding cover crops, figuring out ways to reduce this ultimate soil loss that is a big deal. Soil is a finite resource, so we need to keep that in mind and make sure that we're keeping that resource in the field and not letting it leave the field. So this is what drives me, and I think it's pretty effective in looking at how much soil is moving off of that field in our couple of open winters that we've had. So I know Mark has done some work on looking at some of this erosion in his area, so I'll turn it over to Mark to talk a little bit about what you're finding.
Thank you, Abby. As mentioned before, I'm the crop consultant up along Highway 2, primarily East Devil's Lake, and from Dakota, about 40 miles east, and then about 40 miles both north and south of Highway 2. Work with about 35 different farms, and I could tell you most of those farmers would prefer I not care about soil health, because it is a difficult issue to manage. It's not as easy just finding the wild oats. So this is a different topic. And this started 3 years ago at one of the original soil health workshops put on by Griggs County, southwest of Cooperstown, in a farmer's shop. And the keynote speaker there was this guy. And so when one crop consultant goes to hear another crop consultant speak, there's two very different mindsets in the room. But when I left that meeting, I shared the same mindset as Lee did. And I knew then I had to care more about cover crops, reduce tillage. And of course, working alongside my brother, who's practicing no-till, learning from him, and now working together, trying to innovate new ideas and new ways to manage his land. And I have 2 or 3 other no-till farmers I work with that do a great job and use cover crops. But for the 85% of my farmers, it's the other way around. And not that they're doing anything wrong. They're great farmers. I'm proud to work for them and work with them. They've done a great job. But we can do it better. We can improve, and that's what I'm observant of. And so this field here is my father-in-law's field, and I'm glad he's not here today, because we're going to talk about him. And so I don't actively help Scott on his farm. I actively help my in-laws' side, and I help manage that farm and farm with them. This is a pinto bean field this year. And as we're both combining this field, I call up Rick, and I said, Rick, this field's going to no-till tomorrow. And he said, you think so, huh? Boy, I don't know about that. And I said, well, you're combining on the east side of this field. Look at the headland, and look at the ditch, and look at the soil in this ditch right now. And he says, well, that's there every year. And he's right. It's there every year. So this year when I soil sampled this field, here's a soil sample, the standard GPS composite of it. Go ahead. 2 things I want you to take note of, the phosphorus and the organic matter. Phosphorus is 8 parts per million, organic matter 3.3%, business as usual for this field. In the ditch, I just walked over to it, had a coffee can, and I just scooped up the silt, put it in the coffee can, sent it to Ag Vice, and this is what I got. Phosphorus, 21 parts per million, organic matter, 5.7%. And if any of you have heard Dave Franz in the last 3 years, his presentation is North Dakota, a history of phosphate export. And so Dave has only been telling us we're only losing the best part of our field, guys. When the wind blows and the water moves it, we're only losing the best part. Well, that's going to stop on my farm. This field's going to be no-till now, and it's not the only one. And so for guys to see this and make it personal, it makes a decision to move into reduced tillage and cover crops a lot faster.
Okay, so this is I want to talk a lot about what we're looking for when we're improving soil conditions. And I go in different fields and I'll pick up soil and I'll just crush it like this with my hand. You can do the Haney test, you can do the Solvita test, you can do all these soil tests out there, but this one is instant. You can see what this is. This is from Terry's field after a couple years of no-till and using cover crops. And when I can break apart the soil like that with very little force and get all those different sized chunks in that soil, that's what I'm looking for a healthy soil. This soil has improved dramatically, Terry, right? I mean, over the years and just using these practices. And it's one of the nicest soils that I work with now. It's just, it falls apart easily. And I know that it's going to stay stable when the wind is blowing, but it's going to break apart when those roots try to penetrate it. And that's what you're looking for. And I don't know any other better way to tell you to measure soil health than to just go into your field and grab a handful like that and take a look.
Can I add to that, Abby?
Yeah.
One of the important things about that picture is that it doesn't turn into flour, right? It turns into aggregates, these little crumbles. And that's really important. So the roots will go around those crumbles and the water goes around those crumbles, but those crumbles hold you up when you're out there working that field.
I agree.
So you don't want flour, you want structure.
Okay, trafficability and moisture management. What another, pretty common goal for guys with cover crops, trying to get that ability to go out there and seed their crop whenever. So this video is from the Wahpeton area, 60% clay. I think when you're watching, you can see the raindrops actually hitting the lens. It was raining when we were out seeding this on a 60% clay into cereal rye. And look how clean those tires are as they go through, and the equipment is staying clean. It's allowing that tractor to go on that field. And I think, yeah, you've tried that before too, Scott, and also Terry, and probably had some luck with it.
We ended up, we had planted a cover crop of cereal rye, and this was actually just a year ago, last fall. And I didn't plant into it green. I actually desiccated it about 10 days prior to planting pinto beans. It was a nice seed bed to seed into. The problem for me was that it ended up drying out too much, And so that's a concern with overwintering cover crop. You have to really pay attention in the spring. I mean, that looks like great seeding conditions right there. But if you're in an area where you start to run out of water in the spring, you got to really be careful on these overwintering cover crop.
The point isn't it's not don't use it, it's manage your water and know when to terminate it. That's
Yep,
the smart
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah, so this approach, I mean, RMA guidelines say that you need to terminate, 14 days in advance of planting into a cover crop. So, so this would be against RMA guidelines. I'm still assuming that's correct. What we're trying to do is we have enough studies where we have 2 years of research on replicated plots where we've planted soybean into living cereal rye, about 40 pounds was the rate, and then into non-rye, and we're finding no difference in yield for 3 different spots. One of those sites was in Wapenen, one site was at Terry's in Delamere, the other was up north in Grand Forks, and we're not seeing any yield hit on it. So we're going to continue to collect that data, and that's actually a project that the Corn and Soybean Council has just funded for the next year, is to look at this practice and see if we can collect that data that we need to get this practice approved for North Dakota. But for now, it's a great way to try getting better access into the field and using up some moisture. So I run around in the spring with all kinds of meters, and then I tweet about them a lot. So this is the moisture meter that I use. In the residue field, you can see the moisture content was close to full. 50% is a full soil, it's saturated. When we had the cereal rye as a cover crop in there, we dropped it down to 22% moisture, and then other fields that didn't have any residue or any cover crop on them were 0. I couldn't get a reading on the meter. So if you're looking for something to kind of regulate that moisture, here's an example of how it's regulating it, but it is drying it out. I mean, rye is a water hog. It will use water, and it will use it early in the spring. So that's something to consider and keep your eye on it to make sure you terminate it when it's appropriate. And I think, Lee, did you tweet something the other day about terminating it right before conditions are perfect?
Yeah, my thoughts on the rye is that when you're looking at when should I kill it, you want to kill it before that perfect seed moisture level, where it's just a little bit sticky, like I could probably replant in 2 or 3 days. That type of thought process, now is the time to kill that rye, because it's going to continue to do losses. The thing about it, though, is that you're not going to get the same evaporative losses that you would on a barren field, so I wouldn't go a week before that. So that, hey, I can plant in a couple of days is a good time to terminate that rye.
And I think after seeing Mick's awesome rainfall amount for April and May, those of us that do have rye in the field, and that makes me excited. I mean, that's what we're going to learn from having all this rain in April and May, but I have this rye out here. And I promise you, it's a small part of what we look at. But these guys that have it in there are going to have a nice tool to compare against conventional tillage, black soil. We're going to talk more about this throughout the hour, but that rye absorbing that excess moisture, where I come from, the guys northeast of me have even more of it. Where we have all this water up there, this rye is going to suck it out.
So then, here's a question for you guys. How late is too late? I mean, can the rye get too big where you don't want to plant into it? Is there a stage that you need to be concerned?
Too dry is my thing.
Too dry?
I
So
would
you don't
agree.
care about the size? It's
Well, and it's not on here, but I've got videos of headed out rye that's almost 3.5, 4 feet tall, and the planter's going through it. You can't even see there's a planter out there, and it's just fine. But what happens is, when you get too dry, you get a lot of root mass out there, and you really have a hard time getting that machine in the ground. So you got to manage your water.
I've heard that a little bit too, with even if you're going to strip till in the spring into cereal rye, that some of the root mass is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
So to be kind of cautious of that as well. But then you would adjust that with your seeding rate, right? You would choose a lower seeding rate. And what would you guys recommend as an ideal seeding rate for cereal rye?
Well, we started with 60 pounds 2 years ago. This year we went to 40 pounds. And I'm going to start variable rating rye because I'm concerned about how much water the rye is going to take up. This next year when it's wet, I really don't care. But like years like this past year in 16 when it got dry, I'm concerned about how much water the rye is going to take up. So where the field's really nice in the main part of the field, I'm going to seed a lighter rate. But when I get to the saline and the cattails, I'm going to bump it up. So I plan on being from that 30 to 60 pounds for my rye.
I would echo that. We did the same thing. We had a lot of that 60 pounds. We went into this a few years ago saying, okay, we're going to do a dual purpose on this. We'll use it as a cover crop, and if we can't get in there and plant it, we'll just keep it as a crop, so we seed it at full rate. That's too much. You have to make a decision when you're seeding this, whether you're going to keep it for next year's crop or you're going to use it as a cover crop. And we've been in that 30 to 45 pound range. I like your idea of precision maps for that. We've been doing a lot of spot treatments. I don't have as many whole fields. I'd like to see more whole fields, but we've definitely been doing a lot of this in the saline areas, the low areas, the wet areas. And so we're doing a precision without the map, I guess, in that situation. But you could build really good maps to predict that.
Okay, so another goal that we keep hearing about is this diversifying rotations. Can you get more diverse roots in the soil besides just your cash crops? And so cover crops are an excellent way to do that. And Lee has this conversation about the 5 food groups, and I love it because it just resonates with what you need in the soil and when you need it. So,
All right, so I've been learning on this slowly, and to tell you a little bit about what I do to a crop consultant, primarily in Stutzman, Lemoore, and Barnes counties. A few years ago, you get this question every year: what's the biggest place I can make a difference on my farm? And a lot of times guys are looking at fertilizer, they're looking at seed, they're looking at weed control, they're wondering all of these things. And as you're going through the summer and you're a crop consultant, you're getting blasted by that sand that Abbey was showing. You're trying to drive around the ditches and gullies that are washing out there, and you think, the biggest thing you need to do is protect your soil. And I started looking at that and then trying to sell that to my growers, and it was a really tough sell. One of the things that we're seeing is that it's hard, and it's just like Mark said, you got to really do a lot of different things. My theory has evolved to this point that there's basically 5 food groups for soils, just like there is for people. You need your cool season, your warm season, your broadleaves, your grasses, and your legumes. All right? Now, when you think about that, that's not all that difficult. That'll get you in that system. And what I like to tell guys is if you can get all of those in 2 to 3 years on that piece of ground, you have given it a balanced, healthy diet. Okay? And we're doing a lot of that. If you're a corn and soybean grower, you're covering your warm season grass, you're covering your warm season broadleaf, and you have a legume. You only need 2 more. And what we've done with that was with the rye. The rye is a cool season grass. And then we'll throw in some things like turnips or radish or dwarf Essex rape or whatever. It depends on what your goals are. So I'm not even asking you to do a whole lot. And I've learned over time that I have to realize that most guys are going to continue to grow corn and soybean continuously. Some guys are going to add wheat back in, and I think that's a really good way to do that. But we're trying to find ways to get those other 2 food groups into a corn-soybean system where you still sell corn and soybeans every year.
that makes it sound a lot easier to me. If we're not trying to do these crazy diverse mixes and we're not trying to I don't know, it just makes it seem a lot easier.
Okay, this is my picture, and I'm taking credit for this one. All right, so this grower is Captain Tillage in my local area. He has a lot of salinity. You'll see on, your right-hand side, there's rye seeded there, and I'm just going to tell you on the outside of that picture where the rye is where the cattail slough is. It's right on the border of that. Now, this is where the kochia is at in this field, right? This is a saline spot. This is where the kochia is at. It loves it. It grows really thick in there. And if you look at that field, you can see that the kochia rolled across that screen and towards the uphand, right? You can see that. I hope you can see that. That's 30 pounds of rye, folks. You can see a gopher running in there, okay? There has been no herbicide applied on this picture at all. None. Nothing pre, nothing in the fall, nothing post. That's the rye at 30 pounds. That is ALS and glyphosate resistant kochia. And we spent $7 on the rye. Now, as a crop consultant, when you see this in the field, you decide that you've got to tell a lot of people about this, right? Where are you going to get control of resistant weeds for $7? Is there another one? Or does it go to something else?
I think that's it. So we go to Terry.
And there's no questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
No arguments? No comments? There's one.
How long do you get the allelopathic action with rye? Does it go through the season, or how long do you get that?
So there's more than just...
Let me repeat the question real quick. Is how long do you get the allelopathic effect of the rye? So the rye is secreting a chemical, which is helping with that control. So how long is that?
Okay, so there's more than just the allelopathic, right? As scientists, we're really good at extracting out the one thing that does the good thing, and we put it in a jug and we sell it as a chemical. Okay, there's a lot more going on with the rye. The allelopathy is real. It's part of the system. It's variable. The rest of it is we have canopy. We have early growth. We have interception to sunlight. We have interception of nutrients and water. We have all of these other things going on that are helping suppress the weeds. So it's a multi-system. The allelopathy that we've seen, and I don't have statistics and research to back this up, I just have a few thousand acres of seeing this. What I see generally is when that rye gets to be 3 to 5 leaf is where it's really strong. There's a lot. Before that, there's not enough rye, right? It's pretty thin, the plants are pretty small. It's really strong at that 3 to 5 leaf and up to jointing. Once we get past jointing, I think the allelopathy starts to wear off a little bit. But you have this tall rye that I was talking about. You're also leaving plant residue. That's a mulch, which we use as weed control in other systems, right? You mulch your trees, you mulch your gardens, you do all types of things. So we're seeing rye controlling weeds later in the season than we ever expected. It's really good at early season kochia, like that picture that we showed you. It's pretty good at mid-season water hemp. It'll fall apart. Water hemp's going to continue to come through this later on in the season. It's pretty good at ragweed control, which shocked me. We didn't expect it to help with ragweed, but it does. But it's not an 80%. It's a 50 to 75% control.
So is that, Mark, are you seeing, so I know you have different weeds in your region. Are you seeing similar things?
Yeah, no, everything, I agree with everything Lee's just said there. I would add mare's tail to that list. Mare's tail should be on that list as well as weeds that the rye will affect. But I guess, you know, just comparing what Lee's doing down in Jamestown to where we're at on Highway 2, you know, I would say 94 is the epidemic region for resistant weeds, and Highway 2 is just starting to see it, or there already is epidemic. And so if we can jump onto this rye and pre-emerge soil residual chemicals and other things as well, I mean, we still can stop it up on Highway 2. But, you know, he's using it more as a rescue and managing it now that way, and I can use it more as a preventative, so.
Well, one thing that Mark and I have talked about, you know, we've got a Roundup Ready Extend coming out, we've got Liberty beans, we've got Enlist beans coming out, all these different herbicide packages for our beans to help us mitigate some of these resistant weed issues. We think that cereal rye is probably as good, if not the best tool that we're going to have against some resistant weeds in soybeans. And so, I mean, it's not coming from a big technology company, but it's going to be a very useful tool for some people in various areas. So.
And understand that it's a different tool than herbicides, folks. That's one of the most important things about it. Oh, I use herbicides all the time, and they're very important, and I'm looking forward to the new technology. But the rye is an entirely different tool. And when they talk about rotating your herbicides and rotating your controls and rotating your modes of action, this is a really good way to do that.
I've heard you say before, probably both of you say to pick your herbicide plan first and then pick your cover crops too. So I think that's really important to consider. We've seen probably some challenges on farms where they've tried to avoid the herbicide residual effect on cover crops, and they pick their cover crop mixes first, and they pick their herbicides around what they want to plant as a cover crop. And so I think the reverse is a better approach. And I'm not a weed scientist, but I agree with that for sure.
That's where we've seen our biggest disasters, where we're going in with, you know, like a Roundup atrazine, trying to keep it light so that we can plant anything after that. Then we end up with both weeds and poor cover crop, is my experience.
So that's a great tip. If you take one today, that's a good one. Oops, sorry, Terry. So yeah, we'll turn it over to Terry now to talk a little bit about what he's been doing on his farm and how his goals for managing and how cover crops and reduce till fit into that.
Yeah, hi, I'm Terry Wehlander from the suburbs of Delamere. I farm with my Uncle Don, kind of the Alan Jackson looking guy there in a white hat. And my cousin Steve kind of got into this whole deal. Started no-tilling beans and corn stalks in about 05, so we'd been doing that for a while, but we got these couple quarters along Highway 13. You can see actually behind me, if that picture's up, the cattails behind me. That'd be the ditch to Highway 13. Back in the 70s when they redid the highway, it was basically designed not to drain because they got some money from some wildlife type deal, so they'd rather have ducks getting smoked by pickups every day than making water drain. But since that 93, when we really started getting wet, getting upwelling of salts into my field, and I guess that's where we kind of started with the process we've been working on. Next one. Yeah, like I said, from the suburbs of Delamere, most of our ground's pretty flat. We got some rolling hills that flow into the Wild Rice River. We farm clay to sandy soils. We do have a lot of salinity and sodicity in that area. We corn soybean rotation for many years. We started adding some small grains in, hooked a couple good barley contracts, and the benefits I'm noticing of putting the small grains back into our rotation. I'm also seeing, I think it's hard to make money with the small grains, but I think it's a soil health benefit. And then you can get the cover crops in, and it's all a package that comes together that I think is going to be really good for the future. We put a few sunflowers in last year, kind of a combinability study. Solid seeded sunflowers, and took them off of their Draper Flex McDonald head, and that worked pretty good. Cover crops, we started them in 2014 also.
So I wanted to ask you, Terry, so how much of your land do you put into small grains each year? I mean, it's not much, right? It's your toughest quarters?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, I'm fighting salinity on them 2 quarters there along the highway. For years I was really, I did everything there, working the living piss out of it in the fall, and thinking that'll fix it. The more I work it, the deeper I work it. All the things I could do, I thought that way, and all I was doing is I was spreading it. The worst thing you can do to them salt areas is work it and work it deep. All you're doing is rolling it around, you're bringing more salts up. So the only thing I hadn't done there was, I hadn't tried no-till yet, and that's about the time I met Abby at a cafe talk. And basically there's summer equipment, the only piece we hook onto there is that 50-foot Salford. Everything to the other end, that's just basically yard ornaments now, diggers, chisel plows, rippers. But that's all we do. We no-till soybeans into corn stalks. We spread our fertilizer in the spring, run the Salford over it, and I come in and plant behind that. There's a picture of our no-till drill. That's us right there putting in that piece along Highway 13. That's a heavy ground. And everybody has driven by and said, I'm sure, what is he doing? You can't no-till that ground. It's too wet, it's too heavy, it's too this, it's too that. Well, it works. You just got to put your mind to it. And we're following up the barley with cover crop right here. That year we put a bunch of different tests in with strips. We just left the barley. Wouldn't get the barley coming up after harvest, and then we had strips of different cover crops, and that worked into our next year work and see what the soybeans would do. So this is my ditch salinity affected field along Highway 13. This is the field. Like I said, I met Abby at a cafe talk, and we got to be talking. I said, I got something I should have you look at. I showed her some soil samples and different things, and she said, let's drive, go look at it. I said, it's just 8-9 miles down the road. We get out of the vehicle, and she goes, holy shnikes. And probably not quite them terms, but she goes, what is this? I said, yeah, exactly, what is this? How do we fix this? And so I don't know if she really wanted to ever talk to me again after looking at it, but she called me back and said, yeah, let's take this. I said, well, here, I tell you what, you can have this whole quarter. Let's make it our sandbox and our learning center. And that's basically what we've been doing. So basically, like I said, I've got ditch salinity here. 2014, we started working with this. 14 was a wet year, so we had a full season cover crop that year. 2015, we went in with barley, and we followed it cover crop mixes. Cereal rye, like I said, we had strips out there. We had strips where we just left the barley come back, strips where we had cereal rye, strips where we had different cover crops. And then we planted soybeans into it this year, and we're actually, like we were talking earlier, with the rye and the weed situation, it is absolutely amazing what weeds rye will hold back. And you could just tell it throughout the whole season with the soybeans.
I say one of the things I really like about this field is that Terry was willing to take the north 10 acres just out of production and manage it for salts. You split your field, which I think is a very good approach.
Yeah, and I've got a couple other fields too that we're slowly, I don't know, like I said, for years I always thought this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year. The corn's going to grow this year. well, and you're putting, I don't know, $300, $400, $500 an acre into it, nothing grows. You know, Lee's the one that he's the one that said exactly, what was your quote on that?
Well, you keep putting money into it and it doesn't work. It's just kind of like this up here, right? You know, I mean, I'm sorry about the glare, folks, but there's a point where I could spend all kinds of money trying to grow hair and it ain't gonna work. So I just reduced and moved my efforts elsewhere. And it's actually one of the reasons I grew the beard is so I could make that demonstration. But the point of it is that if it isn't working, why are you doing it again?
Yeah, that's true. So then, you know, like I said, this field when we first started, it was probably a 60-40 split. 60 of it raised a fairly decent crop, and 40 of it was, well, you can look at the picture there. You know, so we're slowly getting it back. It's not something that I'm going to fix overnight. I mean, I know that, but you can see from July of 14, October to 14 to October of 15, we're gaining on it. Some of them areas, you know, basically to start off, you want to plant something because I mean my ECs are through the roof. I got ECs from little to nothing to 17 out there we've found. But you know, rye's are probably your best, or not rye, but barley's probably your best check. But if your rye or your barley grows, that's where your starting point is. If barley doesn't grow, yeah, not much is going to. But you know, that we started that. We've had rye, we've had barley, we've had everything in there. But also, there's some of the areas, every year I'm getting a little bit more. It seems like it just keeps spreading. And if you get some weeds or some foxtail barley grasses or something like that, hey, you can manage them with a batwing. As long as you get something growing. To combat this salt, we got to reduce the tillage and we got to keep it covered. You got to keep something growing there all year round. And that's what we've been slowly working on the main 10 acres of the worst part of the field there.
And one of the things we talked about, Terry and Mark and I were visiting a little bit yesterday, you know, in a corn and soybean rotation, you're planting corn and beans in those areas and the corn and beans are not growing. And so you're not taking any water out of the soil, and so the salt's still wicking up. You haven't used any water, salt area is getting bigger. You go and plant another corn and bean the next year, you're not using any water, salt areas are getting bigger. And so that's, is anybody else seeing that in their fields? I mean, if you have a salinity problem, and we've got it in Aneta, and I mean, Terry's just doing a great job of trying to do something else in those areas to try to draw. What you have to do is move the water, so you're trying to draw the water out, and that should lower your salt levels in those areas.
I guess here we got, this was last spring, we went in early in the demo site area. We put in cereal rye, barley, radish, dwarf Essex, a bunch of things in there. And when that kind of ran its course of time, went out first part of September, I sprayed and mowed that part off, and mowed some of it down, just kind of make some extra mulch in some of the areas. And we went in with a drill that Andy Gates gave me to try out, and we seeded first part of September. We seeded in another rye and some other products that take off this spring.
Yeah, so it does require some effort. I mean, it's not just a one-shot deal, you plant it and you're done. You know, when you're using cover crops to remediate these areas, you're hitting it again and again and again. And when it looked like, I'm trying to remember when we made the call to mow it out, and it was just the foxtail was overtaking. We thought, okay, well, if we mow this and we get a mulch, we come back in and replant something that's going to use more moisture, then that was kind of our goal, and to get the cereal rye in before next year as well.
Yep. Here's a full season cover crop, what it would generally look like. I mean, there's radish, turnip, dwarf Essex, rapeseed, barley, sunflower, sorghum, Sudan grass. And you look at that and it's really lush. It comes to, you know, when it breaks down through the winter, it comes spring. You hardly knew most of that was there. Some of the grasses will still be there and stuff, but it's also a great thing if you got a neighbor. We got out of cattle in 05, but if you could get somebody to graze that, that's a win-win for both of you. Grazing cover crops is, I've seen my neighbors, the Spike Boys and stuff there, their cows coming off, they looking really nice. Even if you don't have water, what I found out talking to them guys is there's so much moisture in the cover crops too that they didn't have to haul near as much water, where they didn't have water available in the fields when they had a tank brought out there. So that's another, you feed them through the front and fertilize out the back. I mean, that's kind of a win-win for both parties there in my mind.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question I know all of you are thinking. how do you pick your cover crops in your mix? How do each of you decide what you want to grow in a mix?
I guess I was looking for something like radishes to do my tillage, go down, bust up the hard pan, and I guess in the salt area, something that'll grow in the salt. And they can be, I mean, you can make it a cheap mix or an expensive mix, diverse as you want, but it just, depending on what you're going for, it's whatever you want to do, really.
And this is the third fall that I've raised the cover crop, so I'm relatively new to the cover crop side of it. But, you know, we started visiting with Mark and then visiting with some seed dealers. We initially picked radish and turnip to get taproot to go down to try to, you know, do a little bit of tillage in that essence. But the cereal rye has got such a fibrous root, and so, you know, we're trying to get something to go down to break some of the compaction to help with that, but then we're also trying to get this fibrous root to help for water infiltration, and then also to have an overwintering cover crop, and that's what the cereal rye does, to have that option out there. I think that, you know, Mark and I were fortunate to go to visit with Joe Brecker last week, and I'd heard him and Abbey at the CTC conference talk about cover crop to break down wheat residue. And Mark initially asked him, what's your cover crop mix? And Joe said, pea, radish, turnip, flax. I mean, that's kind of my standard. Just through experience, that's what I've ended up at. And I wanted to know what kind of formula he used to come up with this cover crop mix to break down wheat residue, because that's one of the biggest problems on my farm. And so he just said that to Mark, and I asked him, well, what kind of algorithm do you use? What kind of formula do you use to come up with a cover crop mix to break down wheat residue? And he looked at me and he said, pea, turnip, radish, flax. Like, there's nothing real scientific about it. It's just a lot of experience to get to that point. And so I'm in year 3 on it, and we'll probably learn things as we go. But as of right now, it's something deep, tap-rooted, and then a fibrous root system.
So Mark, what do you?
For me, you know, we started with the cover crop mixes for prevent plant, you know, 5-6 years ago, and I'm sure many of you in the room did as well when you had all that PP. And so that mix was pretty much carbon copy of that, and that mix was expensive. And so now I use a cheap mix. I use whatever I can convince my farmer to use as cheaply as we can. And so my mix, and in correspondence with the CSP program. But my mix now is a little bit of barley, a little bit of rye, and radish. That's what we're using. I can see us using some flax and peas down the road, but we went from a $15 to $20 an acre mix down to a $5 to $7 mix. And so I think as a consultant, our job is to cut costs, save money, you know, et cetera. And so we're going to use what's cheapest.
All right, so these guys are telling you something without saying it explicitly. Decide what your problem you're trying to take on is, and then pick your cover crops to fit it. So Scott was talking about he wants to break up compaction. He wants a deep-rooted taproot, and he also talked about he wanted to move water, so he's talking about rye. That narrows down exactly what you want to do. Terry talked about using barley for salinity. You pick the plant that does the best thing. So what is your problem? What are you going after? And then you pick the plant. And if you have trouble with picking the plant, that's our job. We're supposed to know this stuff. And there are people that know these types of things. And I agree with what Mark's saying. You don't need a $50 cover crop mix. It sounds great. And I'm not going to be against it if somebody wants to do that. But I think that's the graduate level or advanced level of soil health. I think if you're getting started, and for most of the time, your biggest benefit is going to come with your first shots. So keep it simple. I like to stay $10 or less. I use broken bags. I use what's going to get thrown out. I use what's left over in the drill. I got one grower that never cleans out the drill. He says, I just put a bunch of stuff in these 50-gallon barrels, and at the end of the year, I put them in the drill, and I go plant it. The broken bags, the leftovers, whatever's there. And it works. But if you have a specific problem, pick the plants to address the problem. That's where you start. And I'm going to tell you right now that if you want to have an expensive mix, put in legumes. They're the most expensive thing you can put in. If you go back to the 5 crops, you're already growing a legume. Most of you. Pretty much everybody. And I'm going to say I don't think you need to add that legume into that mix when you start. If you want to move to the next levels, fine. But then you'll already know how to pick your mixes.
For those of you that leave this meeting and start doing some cover crop stuff, just one comment about turnip. I deal with a lot of edible beans in my area and a little bit of conventional soybeans. And those of you that are going to plant wheat, take that off, put it in a cover crop mix, don't use turnip. Because you'll get a picture, well, I got a picture from 2 of my farmers with the turnips in their combines doing edible beans with a nice, thumbs up. But, those of you doing conventional herbicides and edible beans, don't use turnips in that mix. They will overwinter, they're gonna grow, your header's gonna combine them, and it's gonna gum up everything in that machine.
They
So,
smell bad too.
Yeah, so don't do turnips.
I guess here's just some of the strips we put into that field there where we just left the volunteer barley. We did the cover crops, and we came in and no-tilled the beans into it. And we're looking at different things that we seen from that this year. I guess we'll put our heads together more in that next year. Here's the soybeans planted into the cereal rye. So you can see that the beans are growing, the rye's kind of disappeared, but there's not much for weed pressure there. And that just had one pass of a pre after we seeded the soybeans, and right as it right there, you could tell. If you look to the right there was a few weeds there, but that was the strip where just the barley was. So you can see how much cleaner the strip where the rye was keeping that field.
So now, this was one of the fields that we used as one of our research sites to look at this planting green. And your yields, I know this last year was an excellent year for beans, but we had 42 bushel where we had rye, 42 bushel where we didn't have rye. So there's not an effect on yield at that site. And what was your typical, yield that you guys would expect on this field before going down this route? I mean,
Well, it was the salt field, there, so I don't know, we were probably 20 bushel beans. But, when beans were 15 bucks a bushel, you still thought you were making money, but anyway, yeah, I mean, I could see a difference. I can see we're making a change out there, and I think some of it was planting into the live rye just to get it going, get the moisture wicked up, and just their work on the salts.
okay, so Lee, these are yours.
Yeah. So, first thing is that soil protected? Is it going to blow? Is it likely to wash? And when you're paying $3,000 to $5,000 an acre for land, I think you should be thinking about that. Second thing is how much sunlight's getting down there to germinate the water hemp, or the common ragweed, or the kochia. Still talking about $5-6 for the rye, folks. Go to the next one. All right, so this is late season, this is mid-season. You see that there's still some of that residue there. That residue does break down, and I would say about 12 to 16 months, you're going to have most of that residue gone. These soybeans are a little bit yellow. The picture's not off, that's true. They are a little bit yellow. That rye used a fair amount of fertility. That's part of it. This is in mid-July. These soybeans are a little bit shorter. And my grower, in his infinite wisdom, left check strips for me. Actually, he thought he ran out of seed and he didn't. So he had one pass in this field where he didn't see the rye, and then he went down the road a little bit and he saw that he still had some, so he put it in another field. So we had on and off. And later in the season, towards mid-August, we had about a height difference of about 4 to 8 inches on this field. Where the rye was at, they were shorter by a fair amount, and he was really worried about that. And they were yellow for quite a while. And we went in there and looked at it, and the difference wasn't about pods. The difference was the distance between the pods, that internodal spacing, right? So we counted pods, and of course, you guys know that. That's an effort in futility, right? But there really wasn't a whole lot of difference that we could see. The nice part about this was that these were wide enough strips that when he came in with a combine, we're like, all right, this is going to show up on the yield map. We saw nothing. Haven't seen anything since. Been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years on thousands of acres. The same thing Abby's doing. She's actually getting you the data, but we're not seeing the difference. Soybeans don't care about early competition, right? Some of you remember the days when you sprayed Roundup once when you felt like it. As long as you killed the weeds before August, it was probably okay. They don't care that much about competition. Corn's a little different. This is just that same weed picture. Folks, when I look at this as resistant kochia, I get super excited. I hope you do too.
Can I piggyback off that a little bit?
Yeah.
Go back to that picture, and those of you, I'm guessing there may not be one winter wheat farmer in here, but I have one winter wheat farmer. He's on this panel. And you can use winter wheat, if any of you guys do, you can use winter wheat just like cereal rye. And I had one grower this last year, he had winter wheat in 15, of course it overwintered, and we use it just like rye. And so if by chance any of you are in here raising winter wheat, you could do the same thing. And it's cheap, it's basically free seed, and so I encourage you to use it. And the other thing about this rye being used as a weed resistance tool, I wrote my first letter to my working retail. I wrote a letter to my customers warning them what Wehlander was saying about weed resistance in 2003. 2003, Wehlander was that nervous about weed resistance. And none of us listened. Maybe a few of you did, but none of us listened. And here we are 13, 14 years later, chasing our tails, trying to fix problems. This is the same thing. I'm this passionate about this soil health being the same thing. We have NDSU Extension, someone that's really taken it by the horns here, and she's giving us the same warnings. And I just don't want to be, and I don't want my farmers to be in that position 14 years from now saying, I wish I would have listened. So I hope that's where I'm at with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. The only caveat of that is if you are a winter wheat grower, don't put rye in your system. You're going to have rye in your system. Okay? Be aware of that.
There's no winter wheat growers here.
All right, good. We grow corn and soybeans. So we don't have to worry about it. So this is another one of my fields. You can see here that we got a lot of things going on. Fields don't have to be square, folks. And seriously, in North Dakota, most of them aren't, right? When we try to farm quarters as whole things, are the soil types the same across there? They're not even close. This goes back to this example here, right? If something doesn't grow there, why are you doing it? Why are you putting the effort in futility? So you can see the light brown in there in the middle, that's a grass, foxtail, barley, weed mixture. The dark green strip in there is alfalfa. And then outside of that, we've got field peas. We're making a lot more money per acre than we did before with just corn across that, because everything from the dark green in was dead. Where the field peas were at, the corn grew fine. You take those 0 acres out of your yield, what does it do to your proven yield? What does it do to your economics? How does that change what you're looking at? Next. Same thing. You can see the cattails on the side there next to that trail, right? The water sits here forever. We plant corn in there, we get no corn. Why? Go to the next one. All right. This is barley seeded in the middle of a cornfield. Before the grower started doing this, his corn yields in this area where the barley is are about 40 to 50 bushel. Now, hopefully none of you guys have that issue. But between drowned out and salinity, that's what we had. We put barley in here. We actually used, cheap barley. We put it in there in the middle when he had time to get there. So this wasn't barley seeded on time for barley. This is barley seeded after the corn was planted, after it dried up, when he got time to go in there. Cool thing about corn and barley is you got some herbicides that are labeled on both, right? Quite a few, as a matter of fact. A lot of your growth regulators, and some of them are good at kochia, some of them are good on water hemp, some of them are good on all of these weeds. We didn't even have to worry about spraying over the two. In the end, we didn't put any fertilizer on this, and he ended up with 50 bushel barley. His barley yielded as good as his corn did. And his expenses were a lot less. How does that economically work out? The next one. This is rye seeded on a sand hill next to soybeans. So this gets really dry as it goes up the hill. And we know that we need water in August to have good soybeans. Mick Kerr was talking about that today, about there's good rains towards the end of the year. Well, the rye's already dead and done. It doesn't need rain in August. We yielded a lot better with the rye there than we ever have with soybeans. That rye went 50 bushel. The soybeans on that hill typically go 10. Do the math on that.
So I like one of Lee's growers mentioned, I think it was last Friday when we were in Jamestown at the cafe talk there, he was telling me that he uses rye across his entire field. And then he uses that rye as like a Veris map or a salinity map. He looks where the rye is good and it's growing well, he plants his beans into that rye. Where the rye is kind of shoddy and not doing so great, he just leaves it. Sprays out the rye in his beans on the good areas, leaves the bad areas in rye for the rest of the year. Doesn't have to worry so much about weeds coming in. And I thought that was a great approach. When he said that, I've been recommending that to a lot of different growers because I think that's a good approach.
Here's one of my fields there after we get done combining. That's, we don't till our beans into that, but the erosion control, you never see any dirt along the ditches of my fields, I guess. It makes me happy to know that I'm keeping it out there. Dave Franson said that up north there where they've done some measuring, they've lost 17 to 19 inches of topsoil. It gets, the best part of the soil gets way up in the air and floats all the way up to New York City. So kind of trying to keep my ground where it's at for the future generations. And also, when I noticed the last few years when we've got hot and dry, the July and August, you get them days that you drive by and you see your beans, the leaves are kind of wilting or turning that gray color or whatever, and go where all of my our no-till fields are. I got spots, but I don't have whole fields, so I know I'm conserving some moisture and helping my beans out when it gets hot and dry in July and August. We did did some interseeding. Thanks to Tony at RDO, he brought out the Hagee unit for Spikes and us to wheel around and interseed some corn. We did that, what was the time frame of that one?
First week in August.
First week of August. Took that Hagee machine there with the seed tank, took that out and seeded some acres, and that's I guess what it looks like. The radishes got going, then we'll have the rye there for next spring to plant beans into. I guess that's the way my fields look after soybean harvest. I leave them and then we come spread fertilizer of that in the spring, hit it with the sulfur, then I plant into it. And here's cover crops after barley. I had, I guess it was about 11 acre mix. Winter seeded with cereal rye radish. We had some rye and stuff out, or not rye, flax and stuff out there to get the micros going and everything for the corn crop the next year. We seeded, fertilized that, hit it with sulfur, and I planted into that the next year, planted corn into it. And here's another thing too, you look at the different soils. When we first started working on all this lane piece there you couldn't find a worm. Now that we slowly I haven't been disturbing it with tillage, the salts are starting to go down and starting to find some more of my friends showing up. The worms, when they show up, you know you're making a healthier soil.
Yeah, that was one field. I walked around Terry's field after he planted the corn out there, and I looked at kind of the topsoil depth across that field. And I mean, I must have been out there for a couple hours just walking around, and I thought, oh, I'll go get the soil auger to check the depth on these. And I brought it out and hauled it to the top of this hill. I didn't even need it. His soil has gotten so shallow on that field that he's got 8 inches of topsoil on the knobs on that piece. And so really you came in, I think, at the right time to start really protecting that and keeping that soil in place. And you can see that the topsoil, subsoil mixing, and this is very common in most fields I look at, there's a lot of topsoil, subsoil mixing. And it's hard to see in the valley because our subsoils are so dark, but you can see it in Franzen has pictures, and you can see how the subsoil, which is higher clay, higher salts, is being mixed into the topsoil and diluting it. And that's something we need to be aware of and need to be checking in our fields as well.
Yeah, this is a field here too that I don't have a salt issue or anything. It was just, it's one of those fields you kept, what's wrong with, it seemed like the crop was stunted in so much of the field. And once again, I pulled the ripper down thinking, well, that'll fix it. Chisel plowed it twice deep. And here it was, just Abbey going out and saying, well, yeah, you're starting to farm subsoil. And that was, too, it's sometimes, I get you got to do tillage. You can't farm if you don't do tillage. Cold hard steel. Yeah. Well, that's what cold hard steel did to me. The previous farmer before that, it took a lot of the topsoil and I put it somewhere else. So now I'm fighting subsoil issues, and it's another field we're gonna have to look at fixing. And the reason, kind of doing all this, it's for the future generation. Here's my, the little minions, my little nephews, 2 of the 3. And trying to fix the soil and keep the soil around and find it better, or leave it better than I found it for the next generations to come. It's mainly the reason I'm real interested in working hard to work with Abbey and these guys here to, it's basically for the future generations.
Okay, Scott, you're up.
Okay.
We're going north.
We are going north. First of all, my name is Scott Huso and I farm by Aneta. And I was just, when Abbey asked if I was interested in participating in this, I really didn't know kind of what she was talking about. I'd never been to a CornVention before. And so I was honored and a little bit befuddled that she wanted me to be on a panel on soil health. And you look at this picture up here, and if you can see it, so when she introduced me, she said I was a no-till farmer. Does that look like no-till? But I'm going to get back to that towards the end of the presentation. Just to kind of go off topic a little bit, how many of you ever remember the TV show This Is Your Life? It was way back in like the 50s. I don't remember, it was in the 50s and 60s. But so I kind of feel a little bit like that today. So Mick Kerr was here this morning. Mick Kerr's uncle Adolph lived in Aneta. And my grandpa and Mick Kerr's uncle worked in their, he had a welding shop. So the two of them worked together quite a bit, and I helped out a lot there. So I feel a little bit of connection with Mick, and then to be on this panel with my brother. My brother and I argued a lot as we were growing up, and now I pay him to argue with him. It doesn't make sense.
That's the smarter one, I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, he's probably right there. And our dad is here giving us support today, so I feel real great about that. And a little later this afternoon, you're going to hear Dr. Bill Wilson talk. Bill Wilson was a graduate advisor of mine when I went through grad school, and so for a year and a half, I just baited on everything that Bill Wilson said, so I have a strong connection with him. And then the Peterson Farm Brothers, I've watched what they've done social media with their music videos, and they're very musically talented, and what they've done with their blog, and it's just amazing to see that. And Abbey sent out a tweet promoting this panel, and one of my friends sent out a comment that said, Peterson Brothers have nothing on the Huso Brothers. And I knew he was kind of saying that tongue in cheek, and then somebody said, well, you should start up the band again. And so I was in a band in high school, and it got me thinking about that, so I threw out song ideas, and Mark and I have sang together before, and so I was almost going to bring a guitar and play and sing some songs for you, but another buddy was throwing out song ideas, and somebody said, what about the song Scotty Doesn't Know? And that was from a movie called Euro Trip back, and I don't know if it was the 90s or whatever. So I kind of took a little bit of offense to that, but I thought, how appropriate. So I was gonna work on that and play that for you today, but I just didn't have time. Anyway, I just think that it's so appropriate for soil health. And I don't think that I am the only person to say that I really don't know. I think there's a lot of things going around in soil health. I think it's kind of a buzzword, like Abbey said when she started 4 or 5 years ago. It's just kind of exploded. And so I think what we're really trying to get to, at least what I'm trying to get to on my farm, is what does soil health mean, and what am I trying to accomplish with soil health? So talk a little bit about my farm. It's called Ridgeline Farm, and I farm with a partner, Tim Brackey, and my wife. We're partners in the farm. My brother said he doesn't actively help me on my farm, but he's just saying he's not there for labor, but he really helps me on my farm. We're located in northwest Steele County, but we farm in, so Aneta is in Nelson County, I live in Griggs County. Our farm base is in Steele County, and we also farm in Grand Forks County. So right in that little area, we farm in 4 different counties. Our crop mix is winter wheat, spring wheat, barley, canola, pinto beans, corn, and soybeans. And so just a little bit of background. So I did graduate from NDSU in 2004 with a master's in Ag Econ, and I didn't really think I was going to have an opportunity to farm. I grew up working on a farm, but didn't think there was going to be an opportunity for me. But kind of had a golden opportunity in 2008 to move back and start farming with Tim Brackey. And he was, I would say, on the cutting edge for no-till in our area. He started converting land to no-till around the year 2000. Primary reason for him was for wind and water erosion management. And so you know, I started farming on a farm that was no-till. So I didn't, I mean, not no-till, it was a combination of no-till and conventional till. So right away I saw the benefits of no-till. I didn't have to talk anybody into it. I didn't really have to, you know, go to meetings to learn about stuff like that for myself. I was fortunate to see both systems. So I saw the benefits of no-till early, and I saw the challenges of no-till early in my farming career. I mean, it hasn't been all roses. There's 2009, we bought our first sulfur. We sulfured just about all of our wheat stubble just to get soybeans planted. And so it's not the system isn't necessarily a, you know, true no-till. If we have to make, and I'll say some rescue tillage passes to make it work, we'll do that, because I think that, you know, a sulfured pass here, a sulfured pass there is worth it to get the crop, but in the long term, the benefit of the no-till soil structure, erosion management, just greatly outweighs some vertical tillage passes. And then I kind of feel like I'm a little bit late to the game on cover crops. I started planting cover crops 3 years ago, and the reason I started planting cover crop was because it was in my CSP contract. And I mean, I know quite a few other farmers that's the reason they started doing that, because it was an enhancement and they signed up for it. It seemed like a pretty easy thing to do, to throw in a couple hundred acres of cover crop. So the first year I planted about 300 acres, and this year I'm probably triple that. And for various different benefits, and one of the things that I'm really trying to focus on now with cover crop is residue management on spring wheat. One of my biggest problems on my farm is residue, is wheat residue. And I learned just in this last couple months that use of cover crop to help break down residue is a real thing. So that's what we're working on also. And then conversion of more ground to no-till. And so that picture I showed you at the beginning, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end. But we're trying to move more towards no-till. Not in the idea that, you know, this is the, we're trying to save land for future generations. We think we're making more money in our area doing no-till farming than in conventional till. And if I were to get into a situation where I thought I was falling behind, or I was losing money relative to a conventional till system, then guess what? I'm no longer a no-till farmer. Our goal here is to make money. So Abby, if you want to just go on to the next slide there. So this is winter wheat stubble, and the title of the slide there is Structure for Field Access. And one of the main benefits in our no-till system, you know, land that's been no-till for 15 years, we've got just what I call just great soil structure. It's tilthy. You've got lots of pathways. You've got root development. Terry's talking about earthworms. We've just got a bunch of earthworms in the system. So we've got a bunch of holes and things going through the aggregates. So when it rains, we get quicker water infiltration than something that's been conventional till. Because you conventional till, your soil structure just kind of packs down and you get kind of slabby soil structure. So the water's going to sit on top. If it rains, we're in there, I would say probably a day earlier with our sprayer versus our neighbors being able to travel across the fields just because of the soil structure. And this particular field, I was actually planning on chisel plowing this last fall and then planting corn next spring to begin a conversion to no-till. And Abby stuck her shovel in the ground. And I just met Abby this summer. And she stuck her shovel in the ground and looked at the tilth, and she looked up at me and said, "Don't chisel plow." And so now I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So we're going to figure something else out there.
You told me I'm responsible for whatever happens.
Yep. Okay, here's another picture, comparison, different soil structures. I don't know if you can see it all that well, but the picture on the left is, it's pinto beans seeded in a wheat stubble, and I say 1 year no-till. I left the wheat stubble and I spread fertilizer, sulfured it, and seeded the pinto beans. And you just took a shovel and stuck it in the ground. You just look at the soil structure there, and it's very cloddy, it's kind of slabby. If you look right on the spade there, it's kind of a slab of soil. And then right on the north side of the road, this is 1 mile south of Sharon, North Dakota. Right on the north side of the prairie road, took a shovel into a field that had been 10 years plus no-till. So this was soybeans seeded directly into corn stalks. And you just look at the soil structure there. It just, all the aggregates, and you can see pathways in the soil where the earthworms were at, just a big time difference in soil structure. So I think that is one of our biggest benefits of no-till is the soil structure, in addition to erosion control for both wind and water. And then you get, has anybody ever had somebody, probably a high school kid rot around in a wet field after a rain and make ruts all over the place? Anybody ever had that? It could be a kid, or else it could be your soil tester guy. So I'll throw this one over to Mark.
So these pictures here, again, are side-by-side fields. All that separates these two fields is a prairie road. And the no-till soybean field is not a no-till field. It's a conventional tilled field that is not yet tilled. Okay, just soybeans, not yet tilled. And it probably rained, I don't know, a couple tenths this morning, and across the road is previously picketed pinto ground. And just look at the difference. Look at what the structure provided me, even in a conventional tilled system, but it wasn't tilled. And crossing the trail and going into pinto bean ground. But I struggle with this. As mentioned before, I deal with a lot of pinto beans. And that's not going to change. And the guys that have been raising pintos for 40 years in a conventional system, row crop cultivating, picketing, that's not going away. And so I understand that. But what we can do here, as soon as that is picketed and that soil's black and it's really fine, there's pinto bean guys here, we could go out there with some barley or rye or something right away to provide some protection to the soil and get some structure and roots sucking up that moisture.
You're giving away my big ending.
I'll stop there. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
And then here is this is up by Dakota. On the right-hand side is a large conventional tilled farmer, but he's 1 or 2 quarters a year he's putting in the no-till. And this field here is in the 3rd year of no-till. And his neighbor is on the left-hand side, the conventional till. And he drove out there this spring in March or early April, and he drove out there and he was so excited. For once, it's the farmer sending me a picture being excited about no-till. And that's when I think we're headed in the right direction. And like I say, when you can see pictures like this, side by side just in a pickup, you know something's different. And then here's a picture of the rye. I guess this would have followed better after the next slide, but so this is a spring wheat field seeded with the rye. Again, good structure. And this is sucking up the excess moisture, and here's why in the next slide. Up around Nelson County, and I'm sure Walsh and Grand Forks is much worse than Nelson for water right now. These are 2 fields in Nelson County, and the one on the left is barley, the one on the right is wheat. But what are the 2 differences in those practices? In wheat, we pre-harvest. In malt barley production, we don't get to. So you can tell there's nothing growing after that wheat field because it's been pre-harvested. And so we had ruts half mile by half mile by half mile by half mile for thousands of acres just to get across from the soil test. In barley, where it wasn't killed and that volunteer is growing right away, the structure is right there to support me. These pictures are 4 or 5 days apart. And so that's why I know the structure is doing some good in that field.
If you are a no-till farmer and you leave all your wheat stubble and your soil tester sends you a video of him driving through wheat stubble and making these kind of ruts, your first phone call better not be my field. If you're leaving those kind of ruts in my field. Do you want to click on the next one, Abby? Okay, so these are the 2 most critical tools on my farm. This is soybean residue, and I'm actually seeding soybeans back into this last spring. And if you look at my soybean residue there, how it's kind of blotchy, that's my residue management is the biggest problem I have on my farm. So that's one thing I'm trying to, as I go forward here, I'm trying to take different measures to try different things managing residue. But those are 2, John Deere, the one on the left is an 1895 and the one on the right is an 1890, but 2 single disc drills, and those get used a lot. So I put down a lot of urea in the fall onto soybean ground and pinto bean ground ahead of either wheat or corn. I'm not putting in pen, whether I'm putting wheat on that field or corn on that field or what exactly I'm doing, but I'm likely going to go with a grassy crop that's going to require nitrogen. So I do that in the fall, and I don't think, since I'm putting it 2.5 inches in the ground, I don't think I'm really losing anything over the winter time. So I don't see that big of a risk in there, and I need to get something done in the fall because I shouldn't say I can't, but it'd be harder for us to cover everything in the spring. And then, yeah, we seed right into, like Terry, right into soybean ground and right into wheat ground without touching anything. I have spread urea and sulfured it in, and I'm trying to get away from that a little bit to just go right to more kind of pure no-till on some fertilizer application. And as, you know, I just had a conversation in the back. I mean, I'm learning more and more about different types of fertilizer application. In fact, this last year, there's research put out from Ontario, someone in Ontario, and this comes from Dave Franzen, but a urea pellet sitting on top of the ground, not incorporated, breaks down more slowly than a urea pellet 1 inch under the soil surface. Does that just blow your mind? The reason is, where that urea pellet is touching the ground, that's where the urease starts developing and it starts to break down. So it's breaking down in one spot. If it's 1 inch underground, it's starting to develop that urease all around that pellet, so it's breaking down quicker. So that first week, the pellet on top of the ground, you're going to have, I think it's over 20% volatilization of that pellet. And the pellet on top of the ground, you have like 5 to 7% volatilization of that pellet. I mean, it's just, we're learning new stuff all the time. So then somebody in the back said, maybe by just before you die, you'll have it figured out. And I think that's pretty much how it goes. Go to the next one here. And so this is that's a video of us seeding right into wheat stubble. My tripod wasn't working so well, so you're probably gonna get sick watching that. But it's just seeding right into wheat stubble. And like I said, one of our biggest problems is residue management. And so on that particular drill, we're working on it right now. We've widened it from 7.5 to 10 inch spacing. I have my closing wheels. Now I've put on spike closing wheels because I've had problem with slabbing in the furrow. So I'm putting on spike closing wheels, and I'm also putting a trash whipper on the front of every row unit on that drill. A single blade trash whipper. I know 2 other guys who have done that, and we're going to try to make an effort so that one of our problems with the residue is that any kind of dew, your residue is wet, and that is hard to cut through with a single disc drill. And so we have to wait until mid-morning or so for that dew to come off, for that residue to dry off, so that we can cut through it. That's hairpinning. So if your disc blade is pushing that straw down into the ground, that's the problem that we have. So by putting these trash whippers on, we're trying to throw that residue out of the way so we can get more use of that drill during the day. And then the next one, we had this last spring, we had that rain probably the 21st of May, 22nd of May, and we were just having a tough time getting back in the field. And we weren't having sunny days that were drying off our wheat stubble ground. And so we were having trouble with hairpinning with our drills. So we took our planter out there, and we had the trash whippers on the planter, so we lowered the trash whippers, and we planted quite a few acres of soybeans with our planter right into wheat stubble. And I'm not the biggest fan of 30-inch rows, but it worked. I mean, we got a pretty good crop off of it, so I was happy in that aspect. And like I said, so we're planting into bare wheat stubble, and so in my operation, now I'm looking at and I don't have the answer yet, but what can we do with cover crop to help break down that residue so I'm not dealing with such a residue issue the next spring? And then one of the complaints about all the residue on top of the ground is soil temperatures. Well, Mark did some tests this last spring on soil temperatures.
And so, yeah, this is just, yeah.
Was that on my PowerPoint?
So this is a converted no-till field again up by Dakota, and Brent Messner was helping me. He's up here in the front, and this is just barley decay from the fall of 15, untouched barley decay. And we pulled up to this field, and I expected to wipe away the barley and to see ice block. I was so concerned about the soil temperature. We wiped that moisture, we put it away, and we had 53, 55, 59, and 57. Now again, cross the road, same grower, barley, 2 schistoplasties in the fall of 15, and again, it's a little warmer, 60, 57, 56, 59 in the picture. But the difference was the barley in the fall of 15 was using excess moisture. So the moisture was being regulated by the growing crop, because the moisture influences your temperature. So that's why they were very similar, and I was happily surprised.
Okay, so this is just another one of the crops we raise is canola, and one of the reasons we raise canola is because it's a good rotational crop for us, and we plant winter wheat right into the standing canola stubble. I mean, this was actually all straight combine canola, but you cut it high, so you've got tall stubble for a good snow catch. So we're no-tilling winter wheat right into that. Works out well for us in our rotation. And then, just as we get to the last one, you know, we've talked about so this is a snapshot. Don't play the video quite yet if you can help it, but so this is a snapshot that I had in the first slide. So my goal on my farm is, it's not to increase soil health. And so I think that there was a class from the Wahpeton, North Dakota School for Science that had a meeting last Wednesday. And in one of the small groups, I told the students in that class, I said, if you leave here and your goal is to increase soil health, you got it wrong. Because I think you need to have a specific goal and use the tools within soil health to reach that goal. So the goal on my farm is to reduce fertilizer application. And the way that I think that I can do that is to increase soil microbe activity to help mineralize the fertilizer that's A, in the soil, and B, the fertilizer that you're putting down. If you apply, so we're here for corn, if you apply 100 units of N for your corn crop, what percentage of that application is actually utilized by the corn plant? I mean, let's just say a conventional tilled system. What percent of 100 units is actually utilized by a corn crop? Anybody have a guess? 35%. I was going to say between 30 and 40, so I would say we're pretty close. Yep. So Dave Franzen would say 30 to 40% of your nitrogen is mineralized, used by your corn crop. So I'm not shooting for the moon, but I'm trying to get to 50%, 55%, because the living things in the ground are eating the fertilizer and they're helping mineralize it, and as they die, they're releasing that fertilizer to the plant. So it's almost like putting a urease inhibitor on some nitrogen, doing it that way. So that is my goal, and to try to accomplish that, I'm going to continue to do no-till for the soil structure benefit, for the erosion control, both wind and water, and I'm going to incorporate more cover crop to help reduce my problem with the wheat residue, but to also feed soil microbes. And so that comes into play when Lee was talking about determine what your goal is. So we have a goal of having something living on there, but we also want, at least I also want, to feed what's living in the soil. So that's part of it also, to try to continue to feed the soil microbes. You know, also for me, when I say my goal is to reduce fertilizer application, and I really appreciate Terry's slide with his nephews in the pit, because you know, I think that we're all stewards of the land, because none of us are going to be here forever. And the land's probably not going to be owned by your families forever. We're just here taking care of it for the time being. I rent just about all the land that I farm. And so I think that I have short-term, and I would say 1 to 10 year, I'm doing this for profit. And so I understand the altruistic feeling of helping the land, being stewards of the land, but we're doing this to make money. You can't lose sight of that. You can't spend all this money on cover crops, all this money on different equipment, which I feel like I've done the last year trying to set up for strip till, but that is what's always driving me forward here. Okay, so then we talk about conversion to no-till. And I know Mark's got customers that say, I tried no-till, doesn't work. Well, what'd you do? Well, I left my wheat stubble and I planted soybeans into it, and then it's just too wet. Won't work. That won't work. At least in my experience, that doesn't work. I think that trying no-till, just trying it, is a 3-year commitment. And the way that we do it on our farm, and this I've learned from Tim, and so I said my partner's name is Tim Brecky. Most of what I've learned about no-till has come from him, and so I feel fortunate to have had that opportunity. So this field right here was conventional pinto beans. This is just south of Aneta on the west side of Highway 32. And so when I say conventional pinto beans, the fall before, I chisel plowed, it was winter wheat, I chisel plowed twice, came to the spring, I took a Will-Rich cultivator out there, I cultivated, I took my Salford across it to Salford because I put a pre-plant down, Salforded it, I planted it, I row crop cultivated, and then I picketed it. 6 times I just hammered that soil. There's 6 times that I just went out there and hammered that soil. I think picket is probably, and we have some conventional pinto bean growers in here, I think picket is one of the most destructive tools for soil structure. So I was out there picketing as we were combining that field. I had the combine going in the field and I was picketing, and I had my cultivator out there just lightly scratching on the top of where we'd already combined, just to level out behind the picket, because the points of the picket leave these indents in the ground. So he was just leveling it out, and then I had a rock picker out there picking rocks. Came out there the next day with one of our drills and planted rye, barley, radish cover crop mix. And I got a really nice catch on that. So this would have been mid-September, I think it was like September 19th that I actually seeded the cover crop here. But we have the fall that went on forever. That's a quote I stole from Joe Brecker, but we had the fall that went on forever. So we had a really nice catch on our cover crop. And like Mark was talking about, after pinto beans, after conventional pinto beans, there's hardly any residue. So my goal here was to stop wind erosion on this pinto bean field. So then I came back, and go ahead and start the video if you don't mind. So then I came back and used a strip till machine to put strips of fertilizer to plant corn. So in our system, the way that we set something up for no-till is we plant corn to get a deep-rooted crop to go down to help build these root pathways. Then we come back with soybeans, like Terry was talking about, seeding soybeans right into standing corn. It's an easy thing to do. Every time we do it, we kind of wonder if it's going to work. It always works. For us, it always works. But you plant soybeans after the corn. Soybeans are very low residue crops. You aren't dealing with so much residue out there the following year. And then we go to wheat. And so we're planting wheat right into the soybean residue, and then we say we're set up. But like I said, it's a minimum 3-year commitment to convert. It's not just we tried it 1 year. If anybody wants to try it, I would say set aside a quarter and really try it, rather than just direct seeding. I know a lot of people will direct seed, but that is not no-till. That's a different thing. And so we've got the strips into this field, so they're about 8 inches wide. There's hardly any tillage there. That knife is so narrow that's putting down the anhydrous and the dry fertilizer. And then there's discs that just fluff that soil up into that berm. And we're planning on coming back into this field, planting corn right into it in the spring. That's my goal. If I have to run over it with a strip till again to fluff up the berm or do something like that, we'll do that. Our goal is to plant directly into that. Thanks, Mark. Our goal is to plant directly into that and never till that field again. That's the goal, but if we have to change that to make something to work with what Mother Nature gives us, we'll do that, because at the end of the day, we're trying to make money at this also. But that's something new we're trying on our farm, to incorporate more row crop and to help get fertilizer in the ground. So to go back, I know for a fact that I don't have the answers to soil health, but I know that it's definitely a new topic that farmers need to look at. Farmers, crop consultants, soil scientists, everybody needs to look at, to use the tools that are encompassed within soil health to achieve goals that you have for your farm.
Can I say one thing on that, Scott?
Absolutely.
I really like what you're saying. I think one of the important things that he's saying, and I want to double up on this, is you don't have to be a purist. This is not about who's got the best no-till or the best cover crops. You're trying to move in the right direction. If you're trying to reduce erosion, then do that. Reduce erosion. That doesn't mean you sell all the chisel plows necessarily. You might need that tool, and that's okay. But reducing erosion isn't just about, not ever tilling it. If you have to till it, say you put some of those 16-inch sprayer ruts end to end on the corner to corner. Sometimes that happens, right? Are you just going to leave that? I hope not. So you go in and you manage that with tillage, but that doesn't mean you leave it bare after that either, right? You don't have to be a purist. It's really important.
I think also when you say with those ruts, you don't have to do the whole field either, right? You do the spots that you need to do it in. And I know that's hard to do. I can imagine, I'm not a farmer, but I know it's hard for me to leave something not quite finished. So, but that's, you need those tools. And so we have one last thing for Mark to talk about with the strip tilling going in corn.
Yeah, this is just where we're hoping to get to. This is actually one of my crop scouts, one of my NDSU interns, and on his own farm southwest of Talna. And they bought a strip till rig 2 years ago and got to use it this last year. And that's what I want to see on Scott's farm. I want the benefits of even a little warmer soil. I still want that. I want the soil structure. I want the canopy of the residue to still provide reduced weed pressure. And I want the soil protected. So I know there's even pros and cons to strip till, but those are the benefits I'm hoping to get with this rig that I made my brother buy.
That's a good
You wanna
place to
talk
be. You
about-
spend his money, that's a good place to be.
You want to talk about pulling somebody along?
So these are all Bison fans up here, as you can imagine. I think I'm slowly learning to watch Bison games because of these guys. So I see a lot of flags flying on their equipment.
I want to see a different header on that combine. So like Scott was talking about, residue is one of his biggest challenges. One of the things that I think I've seen in the farmers that I'm working with is that one of the biggest deals is to keep your residue even. The patchy is worse. And also for drying it out, you're going to get less drying the closer it is to the soil surface. So I've got growers that are buying stripper headers for their wheat and their barley. And I got guys that are turning off their chopping heads on their corn. It dries out better standing than it does laying on the ground. We've seen that time and time and time again, that it's easier to plant into it if you leave it standing. And then one other thing, you can reduce your nitrogen. I got some growers with some big cojones. And the one guy has been in this cover crop, no-till system type of deal for 4 or 5 years solid, and we think we're really getting that biology going. And he's been brave the last 3 years in a row. We're planting corn, and we're adding 60 to 80 units of N, period. That's all we're adding. That's a low number, folks. He's hit 150 3 years ago, 160 2 years ago, and he hit 175 average on those fields this year. We figure out the math on that, we're looking at anywhere of a usage rate of 0.6 to 0.75 on nitrogen. I'm not saying it's going to work all the time, but I see that it can work. But it's not just about no-till, it's not just about cover crops, it's about managing a system.
So it looks like we've got 8 or 9 minutes left. So does anyone have any questions that they want to ask? Yes.
Yeah, on the nitrogen, do you think you can do that indefinitely, or is the system going to eventually use up whatever is in the ground and you're gonna have to get back to 140 units?
Okay, do I think that we can use up
you
the
repeat the
nitrogen?
question?
Can we continue doing the nitrogen reduction for over time, or is that going to use it up? All right. I think Scott's on the right track with that. I think a lot of the nitrogen's getting cycled. It's getting cycled through microbes. So these microbes have short life cycles. Some of them are days, some of them are weeks, some of them are months. So they eat nitrogen and they put it into their body. When they die, we get it back. Okay? When we have that biology, capturing that nitrogen time and time and time again and recycling it, instead of leaching or denitrifying through the air, we're keeping it in that soil system. I think our efficiencies are going up. I don't know that we're necessarily robbing nitrogen from the soil. I think we're capturing nitrogen that leaves the soil. Now, I don't know how much that is, and I don't have data on that. But I do know that these soils that we're doing no-till and cover crops, we're increasing organic matter. So I don't know. I don't know how long we can do that. But we're managing it as far as looking at the organic matter, looking at the system, and I got one guy who's really brave and taking some big shots.
So we just got a slew of questions in, which is great. First question is, how do you convince your landlord it's a good thing to use cover crops when they want it black? And so you guys have probably worked quite a bit with your landlords on what you're doing and telling them what you're doing.
Yeah, so on the NRCS website, they have a handout. It talks about 5 questions every tenant should visit with their landlord about, and it's all related to soil health. And talks about mining fertilizer, phosphate in the soil, soil structure, erosion, those kinds of things. So if you have a landlord that wants it black, I'd go to the NRCS website and print off that sheet and go sit down and visit with your landlord about that. One of the benefits that I have is we've got very good relationships with all of our landlords, and I think that because of that, there's a lot of trust in that, and I don't think any of my landlords are in fact, that field that we are converting, that field I just showed that we're strip tilling, that landlord, I'm actually on shares on that field, and he has not wanted corn. He has not wanted corn on that field. We're too far north, it's too big of a risk, and I told him that if we want to convert this to no-till, to increase soil structure, to do better water management, and all these kind of issues, we're planting corn next year. Sounds good.
Oh, man, that question,
There's a quick one, I think I can jump in
Okay,
here.
good, yeah, you guys
So,
figure out which question.
reduced tillage is causing a foxtail barley explosion. Help. Okay, my first thought is your soil is getting better. I know that sounds crazy, right? But foxtail barley is one of those things that grows in some really nasty places, some really wet places, some really saline places. And if it wasn't growing there before and you were tilling it, were you actually killing the foxtail barley, or were you just tilling and making the salts worse? This is like picking a scab, folks. Mother Nature's trying to heal itself. She'll use all kinds of different plants to do this. When I see foxtail barley moving in, I call that progress. And I say, stop picking the scab.
We have the soil temp affected in the spring. I think we talked about that with the previous slide. The soil temperature is affected by soil moisture. So it's a regulation tool. How do you convince your landlord about the cover crop? Take her to Abbey Wick meeting. That's the best thing you could do, is take her to an Abbey Wick meeting.
Better than that, you could bring Abbey Wick to the farm.
Yeah.
You could bring Abbey Wick to the farm.
We have lots of resources for soil health. If you wanted to refer your landlords to a resource to look at information, we do have the NDSU Soil Health webpage. So it's ndsu.edu/soil health. We have 30-some videos up there basically on what these guys are doing. We have all the information that we're producing. We have our schedules for the cafe talks, which are again supported by the commodity groups, and that's where we get to the meat of things. You know, we're meeting with 20 guys on soil health, and you could bring your landlords to that, actually. That would be a great part of the conversation. So yeah, I think, I'm happy to help however I can, and we have lots of meetings to help get that information out.
We got another question on here talking about the Green Bridge. The Green Bridge referring wheat streak mosaic crossing. So the way to break that disease cycle is to make sure that you have 2 weeks of no growing between your spring wheat and your winter wheat. So there's a couple ways to manage that. One is to follow with a different crop, but you can still break that green bridge. This goes again back to this doesn't have to be a puristic situation. You need to have 2 weeks and preferably 3 weeks of no green material out there to manage that mite. You can do that. You can do that with a herbicide. You could also do that with tillage if you think you have to, but then you can put another crop in there as a cover crop to manage that. So there are ways to manage this thing around those diseases. But when you trade no-till or cover crops, you're not eliminating problems, you're trading your old problems for new ones.
So I want to answer this one that's on here that's kind of making me laugh. It says, will you please tell my dad he's doing it wrong? I'm not up for that.
And it doesn't say who it is, so you're good.
Right, you're good. It's anonymous. I can see why you didn't raise your hand. So one of the things that I really like, we've been working with that School of Science group. They have cover crop classes and also soil health classes down there. And so we bring them in and they meet with farmers and get ideas to take back to Dad. And one of the students that was part of that group, a guy in his early 20s, he's been working on his dad for a little bit to get him to adopt some of these things or let him try some of these things on a quarter. And so what he did is he told his dad that his dad was going to be busy on December 13th and 14th. This past year. He said, you're going to be busy, Dad. You're not going to do anything. He said, all I need you to do is get in the pickup in the morning on the 13th, and we'll just see where we go. And he signed him up for the Conservation Tillage Conference, got his dad down there. His dad thought he was going to breakfast at like Perkins or something, you know? And they show up in Fargo at the Conservation Tillage Conference, and they came back the second day, and his dad was still there. And I thought that was really, I mean, he said to his dad, you'll really like this. I want you to see this stuff. And he's been bringing him around to do those things. So just get the dad in the pickup and take him to some of these soil health things that we have. Take him to meet with other farmers who are doing these things. I mean, that's very effective, and at least learning about it and figuring out if it's right for your system.
And I want to add to that, to the dads in the room. I work with a lot of father-son operations. And to the dads in the room, your dad didn't farm with auto steer. Your dad didn't farm with precision ag. You are. There are going to be things your son or daughter do that you didn't do. It's going to happen. So just have to learn to accept some of that. I mean, even now, my 30-year-old farmer who just loves the heck out of variable rate, his 65-year-old dad still hates it. So there's always going to be that disconnect from generation to generation. But when you're gone, something will change anyway. So just learn to accept it earlier than later.
You mean like not starting until 9 o'clock?
What's that?
You mean like not starting until 9 o'clock, what your son does, you're supposed to do?
That's a different problem. Yeah. Question out here.
In that, I don't have a question, but in that vein, I just overheard one guy talking in a bar to another guy. And he said, once I understood, and this guy was 65 years old. He said, once I understood he was smarter than I was, things went a lot smoother.
So I guess we're just about out of time. I think, there's still some really good questions on here, but I know I'm going to be around the rest of the day. I think you guys are sticking around the rest of the day, and we could talk about these things over lunch or whatever. But really, I want to thank this panel for being up here. These are guys that I rely on heavily to learn about new things in agriculture, and there are a lot of farmers in this room, too, that I rely on heavily to learn about these practices and to try them out. And these are the guys that people are watching in their neighborhoods, and they're seeing what they're doing, and I think that's really important. I know that their message is always going to be more powerful than mine as a soil health extension specialist, because when you hear it right from the farmer or from the consultant, I know that means more. So thank you very much, you guys, for doing this, and I appreciate it every time that you guys help me out in these situations and doing these panels. And I don't know if we have, Dale, you want to give out gift cards?
Well, yeah. Let's first of all give these folks a great round of applause. What a great one. I'm not a farmer, but I've been out to Abby's site once. She tries to get me out there a little more often, and I'm gonna participate in that, hopefully more so this coming year. But thanks so much to all of you guys, Abby, Scott, Terry, Mark, and Lee. What a great exchange of information. I really liked how you put together the slides and the video. Great event. Well, we have lunch coming up, but before we break for that, we promised a couple of winners of registration. So I've got one winner, Annie Osborne. We got Annie in the building. There you are. Okay. And then Richard Workin in the back. So I've got two $25 gifts here. So here's the play for right now. We're going to break for lunch. Plus, we have our annual corn meeting. So I think I'm going in the right direction. The pool area is where you go for lunch. You can either sit in the pool area, or those members that want to sit into our annual meeting, welcome. We're right next door. Carson will lead our annual meeting at that event. We will come back here. If you can get in here before 1. We've got the Peterson Farm Brothers at 1 o'clock offering us a little edutainment, is the word I got, to provide. So let's break for lunch. Again, round of applause for these great folks for what they do and the other item. Last thing, someone mentioned to me that North Dakota Corn, the Council of Growers, I think Greg LaPlante's in the audience. They're the ones who started moving into the share farm and funding nutrition on the soil and all of that a few years ago. And look what's happened since, along with the other commodity groups. So great credit to our council, our growers, and Greg and the team back in the day. So thanks all. Let's have lunch, and we'll see you a little before 1.
It's funny how the whiskey eases the pain. It softens her words rolling round in my brain. Instead of